To make any kind of sense of it, I need to go back 3 years. Back to when I started Max Payne Let's Play. Well, you may or may not have noticed there hasn't been a new part since then. I have no illusions. I'm a critic, not an LPer. So I'm gonna make it up, show I'm not completely useless. By doing a review on all 3 entries in the Max Payne franchise. And no, I'm not gonna do the whole video in this voice. Max Payne is a New York cop, one of the best in the business, constantly being asked to join the DEA to do undercover work. He has a lovely home and a loving wife and newborn baby daughter. However, his version of the American dream turns into a nightmare when he comes home to discover his family brutally murdered by a group of killers under the influence of a designer drug known as Valkyr. Now, after 3 years of working undercover with the DEA, a man with nothing to lose, Max finds himself the fall guy in the mob's drug ring, and will soon unravel the mystery behind the death of his family, one bullet at a time. Released in 2001, Remedy pushed the boundaries of what a third-person action shooter could be, featuring a well-thought-out, masterfully scripted, and suspenseful story penned by creative head Sam Lake, told through comic book panel-style cutscenes. It was evident that this young company was going all out to tell a gritty and cinematic crime story. From minute 1, you're rooting for Max as he's the epitome of the dark underdog vigilante hell-bent on justice. And as you venture deeper into the dark and cold streets of nocturnal New York, you too become thirstier for the truth. Now let's talk gameplay, because that's probably what Max Payne is most well known for. Bullet time and shoot dodging. Nothing else need to be said. When I first got Max Payne through Steam, I had no idea what to expect. But when I learned I could dodge bullets and control time like an action movie badass, I was 100% invested in whatever the game was going to offer me. You'll have access to weaponry that feel and sound satisfying, and as you quickly become overrun by legions of mobsters and henchmen, it becomes a cool comfort knowing that you have just enough physical ability to tip the odds in your favor. Max Payne's visual and aural presentation is fantastic. The streets of New York are alive, swirling with a relentless snowstorm. Monster hideouts are grungy and dark. Powerful industries are cold and foreboding. Max's dreams are warped and unsettling. Every bullet leaves its mark, every blood drop leaves a stain, and every spent casing and annihilated corpse rests where dropped. Accompanied with a masterful soundtrack that piles on the atmosphere, and you have a true feat in game noir. However, Max Payne is not flawless, and there are some aspects that time hasn't been kind to. While the environments and engine physics hold up remarkably, the character models can be clunky and, quite frankly, ugly, most notably Sam Lake's strained model face for Max. The game is difficult and presents a stiff challenge, but that can often come from bullet sponge enemies and biased weapons, for instance being killed by a shotgunner on the other side of the level. And while James McCaffrey provides excellent narration to the cutscenes as Max, his voice can become monotonous and unenthused, while other voice performers are hammy and awkward. Still, when weighed out, Max Payne is a gaming feat that works infinitely more than it doesn't. It redefined action video gaming and has an incredibly well thought out and expertly written story. The game has been met with immense praise and just poured the foundation for what would turn into an incredible franchise. After the events of Max Payne 2, The Fall of Max Payne, takes place 2 years later, with Max being accepted back onto the police force after some higher-ups pulled some strings. Max has become more bitter from his vengeance and has no delusions of being the good guy. When he begins investigating a series of contract killings performed by a group of mercenaries known as the Cleaners, he finds connections to an ancient mob war between the Italians and the Russians, shady dealings with an organization known as the Inner Circle, and somehow fitting into it all is a femme fatale named Mona Sachs. After Max Payne's success, Remedy knew that they had some big shoes to fill, immediately going into development on Max Payne 2. Sam Lake strives to write a deeper, darker, and more entangled story with crime, corruption, love, and loss. We find Max taking lower than he's ever been just when he thinks he has his life back together. He falls for a woman he never dreamed he would, and he'll end up making a very unheroic decision. Gone away is the cheesy or boring voice acting, and here now is a fantastic performance by McCaffrey as Max, and wonderful voices married with memorable characters. Accompanied with a brilliant script and fantastic graphic novel visuals, and you may not have one of the best examples of video game stories, but one of the best examples of video game storytelling. Gameplay-wise, Max Payne 2 is just as phenomenal as its predecessor. Things like shoot dodging and bullet time are honed in and tightened up. New weapons are added, including the ability to dual-wield Desert Eagles, which is friggin' rad. And that's pretty much it. Other than the fact that there are a few instances where you play as Mona, Max Payne 2 is exactly what it needed to be in a sequel, gameplay-wise. It's amazing how far we came in 2 short years. The visuals in Max Payne 2 hold up astoundingly well. The character models and ragdolls are slick, the engine once again allows all your carnage to remain on the floor, and the game is once again framed by the gloomy and gritty streets of New York, this time caught in a torrential rain. Set pieces include high-end New York apartments, the ghettos, and bad back streets, the police precinct, and the typical Max Payne warehouses and abandoned buildings, all of which attribute to the journey you partake on. Also, the game contains a fantastic score of cinematic emotional quality, including the song Late Goodbye by Poets of the Fall, which will shoot dodge right into your feels. Now, the problems I have with the game. Like I said earlier, Max Payne 2 is a fantastic piece of storytelling. The story is delivered with the same competence as the original, and I love everything it portrays. I simply don't find it as interesting as that of the original for some indescribable reason. The story is a stroke of genius, just not a strong genius. Also, the game is incredibly short and, at least in my opinion, too easy. Guns, ammo, and painkillers are plentiful, and the enemies aren't quite as bullet spongy, so obliterating your foes isn't difficult. The game's length is a touchy subject, however, as the story works perfectly in the time frame. It took me around 5 hours to beat, where Max Payne 1 took me about 10. It's just a short game. Despite all this, The Fall of Max Payne is a fantastic follow-up to the original masterpiece, and remains a strong candidate for the sequels that better the original debate. It's got a gritty story, fantastic gameplay, and a super memorable score that racks up the overall atmospheric experience. The game was and is a critical success. However, it failed to match the same sales figures its older brother had, leading to an unsure future for the franchise. Then Rockstar bought the rights. It's 9 years later. Max has left the NYPD, sunken deeper into bitterness and disgust with the world around him, and developed an addiction to booze and painkillers. An old friend from the police academy asks if he would like to join his line of work, becoming a bodyguard for aristocrats in Sao Paulo, Brazil. After angering a mob boss in New Jersey, Max accepts, and starts a new chapter of his life in a country he doesn't speak the language, defending the prolific Bronco family. However, things go from fine to fucked up when members of the family are kidnapped, and soon, Max finds himself the pawn in a grand scheme of corruption once again. So, he decides to handle the situation the only way he knows how. In the hands of Rockstar, we get a threequel that stays true to the roots Remedy planted, but has enough differences to keep things fresh. A risky move that upset a lot of fans. Replacing Sam Lake are Dan Houser, Michael Unsworth, and Rupert Humphreys, delivering a gritty and violent tale that's more akin to modern action crime thrillers than classic film noir, even though it does feature a brilliant narration. This isn't necessarily a bad thing, it's just different, and it suits the vision they wanted to represent. Max is older, colder, and even more jaded and cynical, and James McCaffrey's performance is the best it's been in the entire series. But Max is no different from his early days. When he's been played, he's just as angry and brutal as always. The use of Sao Paulo is also a brilliant way to show just how alienated and cut off towards humanity Max feels. And while some fans hated that New York wasn't the setting, I welcomed it. So how did Rockstar handle the tried and true gameplay system for Max Payne 3? Wonderfully. Max still shoot dodges with as much agility as always, and the bullet time is still a useful tool. There's also the ability to stay prone after diving, a last man standing mechanic, and a more modern ADS type system, and most helpful yet, a cover system. The cover system is a welcome change up to the Max Payne formula, and something you'll be thankful you have as the game progresses, as Max Payne 3 offers a stiff challenge. You will die, and die, and die, regardless of if you hug that wall or not. Enemies can circle around and cover can deteriorate, so good old running and gunning still takes center stage. You may have noticed that I haven't been using my own captured footage for Max Payne 3. That's because it runs like garbage on my computer. Max Payne 3 is a visual masterpiece that demands to be experienced on a high-end PC. The city of Sao Paulo is just as alive and unforgiving as the old streets of Manhattan, which you visit in flashbacks. The favela is dark, grungy, and cruel, while the upper-end apartments, clubs, and offices are vibrant and pristine, offering a stark contrast that may or may not have been wanted to be accomplished. Bullets tear through flesh and bone with stunning and bloody realism. The levels are scattered with bonus clues and pickups to find, so the exploration factor and attention to detail is superb. The visual filters are a tad strange, but you get used to them, and the cutscenes are well shot, so to speak, and performed. And on top of it all is a dark, moody, and invigorating soundtrack by noise band Health, featuring their awesome single Tears. Now, I can praise Max Payne 3 left and right, but there is one gaping sore spot for me. The story. I found the story to be utterly convoluted and thoroughly uninteresting. Basically, all you need to know is Max has been set up as the fall guy again, and that's it. The rest of it is throwaway politics and shady dealings that aren't very unique and left me feeling that it was building up to something that never quite happened. The most interesting moment is when Max shaves his head, because that's when the old school ass-kicking Max comes out to take control of the game's story, not the other way around. Though it was disappointing the same amount of masterful storytelling and writing wasn't reached, I love Max Payne 3 just as much as the other entries. Yeah, it pissed a lot of fans off with the lack of graphic novel cutscenes, Max angst and baldness, and just the overall drastic change in style and setting, but that was the whole point of the game. Plus, the game was just fun as hell to play through. In fact, that goes for all of these games. They're just plain old fun, and I can't possibly give them higher recommendations. Considering how as I like different aspects from each game, I give the series as a whole a 4.5 out of 5. If you consider yourself an action gamer and you haven't played the Max Payne games, just do it. Each one is an excellent example in showing you never cross a man with nothing to lose.